Hello and welcome to the Comedians Paradise. This is a podcast where we speak to comedians, comedy promoters, and clowns across this mad and insane world of comedy. Now, today's guest is Holden, the comedian that I met in London whilst I was traveling from Austin. And they're going to tell us about they're going to answer this question. They're going to tell us about their amazing journey in comedy, but they're going to tell us, is Austin the new mecca of stand-up comedy? Please welcome Holden.
What's up? What's going on?
Is,
The
is
answer
that,
is yes. We can end the podcast now.
but right, that's done.
That's it.
So, for anyone that's listening right now that doesn't know about you, tell us a bit about who you are and your journey into the Austin comedy scene.
So I am a military veteran. I was stationed pretty close to Austin when I was here the first time prior to it being the comedy, like right before Joe Rogan bought the mothership. It was just a theater that was downtown, and there wasn't a lot of comedy here. There's a lot of alt comedy, a lot of improv, and I just had no want to do improv. And so I left and went back to Phoenix, Arizona, and I started, building and working on writing jokes there. And by the time I graduated college, I came back to Austin, and lo and behold, every comic is coming from LA, coming from New York to try to essentially oppress anyone at the mothership to get a spot. So, I mean, I came back and hung out at Shakespeare's a few times and didn't get on. Kill Tony signed up a few times, but just been going to there's so many mics here. Every night there's a mic. It's good practice for us. And then, yeah, you get booked pretty often out here. So Austin has definitely made a dent. Essentially, it felt like overnight post-COVID, you know what I mean? Like, it just feels like everybody's coming out here to do their thing. And I said, screw it. Might as well join the crew. And yeah, I've been doing a lot of queer mics. I've been doing a lot of alt stand up. I am a transgender man. So I tend to flock to those spaces, and my jokes will hit a lot harder in those spaces as well as they can, as long as they're funny. I mean, you can make anybody laugh with who you are as long as you're funny out here for the most part.
What have you found when you're playing shows with queer mics compared with regular mics? I know I've not been to any of the queer comedy shows in the London scene. Well, I mean, our friend Lucian's does a few shows here and there, but I know there's loads of like queer comedy shows in London which I haven't really seen. I don't know the audience. I don't know what kind of comedy works for them. But from someone that does both, what would you say the crowds are like in I'll say mainstream comedy shows and queer sort of comedy shows?
Your audience in a mainstream, it's mostly tourists. It's mostly people who kind of want to be shocked more than anything. They want, they want original jokes. They want a perspective that they might not agree with. But it's kind of like, I feel like the mainstream for me, it's more of like a Q&A after I get off the stage versus, yeah.
No, that was my. I
Yeah.
wasn't asking a question. I was going, "Oh, okay." 'Cause I was
Oh
like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
was surprised to
yeah.
hear that.
It's more of a like, a Q&A like after a straight mic or after a straight show. And then for the queer shows, it's just a lot of people come in for those, and we tend to have really good audience sizes, and it's a supportive group but you can there's always someone to get upset, regardless of your mainstream mic, your queer or your alt mics. There's always someone that's gonna be like, I didn't like that. So, but the queer ones, it's been a welcoming space for sure. A small space, but pretty welcoming.
Okay. And what do you so there in terms of how do you play them? What do you make of like when you from your experience, do you adjust your set differently based on those sort of shows?
Oh, absolutely. My mainstream shows are more about the military because I know that's more relatable to a lot of, because we have, like I said, there's a base north of Austin. And so we do get a lot of veterans and a lot of active duty military. So they can relate to that more and laugh more so at that. They get a lot of those jokes. But when you go to a queer mic, it's definitely me talking about being trans. And then when I was a lesbian, quote unquote, and just like that kind of dynamic, it's different. Like my military jokes don't do well in a queer room, and my queer jokes don't do good in a more conservative mainstream room. So it's it's a little bit of both. Like I always have two sets, like which one am I going to do tonight, and I just kind
Okay.
of stand around. Hopefully I'm not first up. And yeah, definitely have to check my room before I get on stage.
When you're the what do you make of like when you, so I went to a clown school in Goliath and it's a field of a lot of theatre people, but whenever they gave us an exercise, I found it was always good to maybe go up third or fourth. Because if you do it any later out of a gloom of 20, you avoid going up. But number one, you get to see someone else practice it, and then you can get some ideas on how you should approach the exercise. And whenever you're doing a comedy show, like it's always good to watch someone else go first, then you can see the audience. Do you find that as
Yeah,
well? Like you can assess more the audience and how to adjust your set, like later on in the show, or what?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's like I prefer to go up, you know, like third or fourth, but not too late because you start to lose people, especially if your first few comics are just bombing. But sometimes I'll just use that time to talk about what the last person talked about. If it wasn't hitting for them, another observation would be great. I mean, what like 2 months ago, the big ticket joke was uh, Luigi Mangione. I don't know. I'm sure you've heard about the guy that took out the healthcare CEO, and that has been the biggest like current event joke. And so you watch people go up and try to make jokes about it, and you kind of can adjust your set. If you have like a Luigi joke in there, you'd be like, all right, this person hasn't hit with like three, or they're killing it. And so why not continue on with the topic of the night, I guess. So I prefer to go kind of middle of the ticket.
Now, one thing that I want to ask, and this is from someone that's a bit of a. So I had another. This is, I think this was a couple of years ago, but this guy's a very interesting guy. I recommend anyone who's listening to the podcast, and I recommend you listen, Holden, as well to this guy. But there's a great comedy interviewer called John Fleming, and he's interviewed like maybe 400 or 1,000 comedians. And I had him on the podcast, and he says a lot of times in comedy there's no money in it, but what he finds interesting about comedy are the people in it, and often like what jobs they do or who they are outside of it. Now,
Mhm.
with yourself being like trans and in the military, there's a big story there. And if I can ask, like, what is it that, how did your experience shape in the military shape you as a person and your approach to comedy? And the other question is, what was it, yeah, what was it like when you had to make the decision to be, when did you know that you were trans, and when did you make decisions for it, and how did that shape your comedy?
I so military. It's a funny place, right? Because you're stuck with a bunch of kids. Because a lot of us are poverty hires. We all join to find a bed and a place to essentially stay while doing this job, and it's like you find the comedy in it, and it's funny because that's a lot of people say that's where your dark sense of humor comes from because it's like you have somebody who may be your boss or your sergeant, and they'll be like, all right, go sweep the sand, and it's like you're out there sweeping the sand with five other people and you're making jokes about how ridiculous this actually is, and it really makes a stupid task better when you joke about it. So like that sense of humor just kind of starts to flow. And the funny thing is, the funnier you are in the military, the less trouble you seem to get into, which I myself am. I don't want to say in general trouble, but I have an issue with authority. And I always have been that way. But if I could joke my way out of being in trouble, which I've always done, then it just made the military experience easier for me. And that's essentially what I did for 6 years was joke my way out of uh, being a responsible soldier for the most part. And then kind of figuring out I was trans. I figured out while in the military during the towards the end of the Obama administration, I had seen this soldier, this jacked big dude, like all American soldier guy, and the rumors were like, "Hey, you guys know that guy's trans, that guy's trans," and I'm like, "That's what a trans person looks like. Like that's what that looks like. That's me. Like I am, like there's something that was always missing from me being, a woman and a lesbian and all these things, and I just couldn't figure out what it was, and I just had this missing piece, and that was kind of like my aha moment right there. Was like, that's me. I've always felt like there's something more masculine to myself than anything else, but um channeling that into comedy, it makes people, and especially like when I had told a few people in the army, I didn't start transitioning until I got out of the military, but I did tell a few people while I was in, and it's easier when you can comfort them and make them laugh about it because it was starting to become a taboo situation once Trump got elected, and was like, we can't have these people in the military any longer. And by that time, my contract was essentially up regardless. So it's easier to make people kind of laugh. And in the military, there'd always be that one, redneck guy who's like, I don't really like gay people, or I don't really like, trans people, or I don't blah, 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 blah. But you kind of, make me I like you, and I'm like, we're just all people. We all like
Hmm.
it works that way. You just make people comfortable with who you are, and eventually they'll be like, yeah, I got a trans friend, actually, my buddy Holden, blah 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, I'm just a regular guy, I for the most part.
What? Okay, so following on from that, what what do people often? You mentioned a bit there with your answer just there, but what things that often people get wrong about being trans that you find funny and you make jokes about?
Well, right now in America, we have a lot of weird talking points. And I read actually today that Trump had said something about we're spending money on turning mice transgender. I've never seen a
Ooh.
transgender. Yeah, they're spending billions of dollars to make mice transgender. I'm like, I've never seen a transgender mouse my whole life. I've been to trans events, never seen a mouse just chilling at the bar with like a mustache like mine, just be like, yeah, me too, buddy. Like there's just misconceptions of like we want to bother people and we want like the children factor of like we want kids to transition. It's like no, I honestly don't want anybody to transition because that's more competition for me. You know what I mean? Like
Oh,
how can I be the funniest trans guy in the room when there's 10 other ones? I need to be the singular. No, I'm just kidding. But uh it's there's a lot of misconceptions of like, people who don't interact with trans people or even know that we're there until you tell them. And it's one of those things that there's like, I thought you guys were like, trying to, sneak up on people in the bathroom. And I'm like, brother, I go in the bathroom just like you and I get out just like you. It's not a conversation zone. You know what I mean? Like there's just a lot of, you know, people thinking that we're just these like Disney villains just sneaking up on you and trying to, make you change over. Not like that.
and I've got a really stupid question to ask, and feel
Go
free to
for it.
punch me if you ever see me. But what is the day to day like? I don't. I heard that there's all sorts of like chemicals that you have to insert into yourself when you're trans. What's the day to day thing as a trans man that you have to do?
For the most part, I just inject testosterone once a week and I am set and I act
Okay.
like an idiot the rest of the week. Not saying that men who naturally produce testosterone are idiots, but I really lean into it. So, I mean, yeah, it's just once a week. I just inject testosterone. There's been a few times that I've been traveling and I try to get into the gym and I've seen men injecting steroids more than I've injected, my my dose. And I've actually been offered like, hey, you want some of this? And I'm like, no, buddy, that's intense. I'd like to keep what little hair I have right now. I'm good. Yeah. It's not much different than just an average day. I mean, once a week injections, that's probably the worst part.
Okay. And what what do you find to be what's the biggest bit of comedy jokes for you? Like in terms of where people react to people like people say all sorts of stupid things to you, and that must bring a lot of funny material.
Yeah. I One of my biggest jokes, um, surprisingly, comes from my mother, who is a very free spirited woman. My mom and my dad. My dad is African American. My mom is a white woman. And my biggest joke came from my mother basically saying that my transition is going great and I look like a celebrity. And I was like, what what do you mean? Like, who do I look like? And my mom was like, you're starting to look like, and this is when I had a full head of hair. She's like, you're starting to look like Leonardo DiCaprio. And I was like, whoa, that's a compliment from my mom. And then she stopped me before I could say thank you. And she goes, but you only look like the Leonardo DiCaprio from Django Unchained.
Oh, ho, 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 ho.
The only Leonardo DiCaprio you look like is the slave owner Leonardo DiCaprio. And I was like, Mom, that's okay. That was kind of a backhanded compliment because if you could pick Eddie, like I'm thinking, you know, Romeo and Juliet, or even I'll take Wolf on Wall Street, Leo, but you gave me the worst one you could, you know. So there's that. That's probably the biggest backhanded comment that I've used as a joke, and it hits every time. And people have been like, "Yeah," when my hair is about when I met you, people be like, "Yeah, I can see it, I can see it," and I'm like, that's not good. I gotta do something different.
Now, I'm gonna. One thing that was interesting, and I think there's a couple of comics I've had coming from Austin. I know there was Lauren Compton. I mean, she's doing very well for herself at the moment.
Yes.
Uh, the I've forgotten the guy in the big afro that looks like Lionel Richie, from Austin. I,
Mars, maybe.
oh, I don't know. I can't remember. I've forgotten his name. I'm sorry if you're
It,
listening.
yeah, Drew Nickens, who is now a Kill Tony regular, hung out with him a lot, and we're decent friends. He definitely has overnight just gotten big, and also we're like pretty much home to Shane Gillis, Tom Segura at this point, Ron White. So there's a few that.
Is Austin the new mecca of comedy, as they say? I mean, from your experience as being a comic that's there, what are your thoughts in it? I know that you, if I'm allowed to say this, because I do remember you telling me, I remember you telling me about a comic. They got through to Kill Tony, and they asked you for feedback, and you said it wasn't as good as you. Well, it wasn't good. That's what you told them. I remember.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
what? Yeah, is it the new Mecca? And what your thoughts on Kill Tony? Because I know that I spoke to Richard Williams, and he said to me that he looked at the whole thing as a whole, and I gigged with Hans Kim when he was in New York doing an open mic, but he says so many comics do it. It's open micers, and they get made fun of by comics that are a lot higher up. And also he says it's not necessarily the opportunity you think it is because how many comics go on there to be really successful? It's only
Yeah,
like a handful.
yeah, yeah. It's cutthroat, is Austin the new mecca of comedy? Yeah, I would say that we are. Yeah, I mean, in some ways yes, but some ways no, and it's tough because it's like you're still in Texas, right? So Texans are always like they think they're their own country. So of course you ask a Texan if it's, and I'm not a Texan, but if you ask a Texan, is it a mecca of comedy? They're going to say in a heartbeat, yes, it is. But for those of us that have, gone other places, I honestly think that it is in line to be, but I don't think that it has the type of pull that New York may have or LA. Like I think you don't get booked as much in Austin versus, somebody coming to see your set in Los Angeles or someone coming to see your set in New York. I've done a few mics in New York and had to leave shortly after and have had people come up to me and be like, "Hey, I got a show next week. Pay you a little bit. Do you want to do it?" And I'm like, I literally have to go back to Austin, but they are so gung ho to book in those places versus Austin's like people will beeline it to the mothership first thing
Oh,
when they get here. And I Kill Tony to me, I when I had first started out here, I didn't want to do it because of that reason, because I didn't want to be made fun of for, like I wanted my jokes to hit and I wanted that to be the funny part. And yeah, it does seem like the success rate there is fairly low, unless you get a regular spot like Drew or Casey Rockets or any of those guys, Hans Kim. Um, but it seems that that is a very rare opportunity. And even if you go to tour afterwards, you still have to build a funny set. And a lot of people, like, they got their 1 minute of jokes. That's all they got. They're not going to be able to do 15, 20 minutes for a crowd. And so that you kind of lose that audience. Um, but yeah, it's Kill Tony is like there's a lot of people, there's a lot of comics on 6th Street who are like, "Oh, have you been on yet? Have you been on yet?" And it's like, I'm not really motivated to do that quite yet. And we actually had, I feel like people reveal too much on that show because we actually had a person from the UK end up getting put sent back to the UK because they revealed too much and they were staying here longer than anticipated, and just kind of like everybody watches that show, so they got caught up in the you gotta go back home. You're just kind of, you've been floating around here for a year and a half and you don't have, the proper like work visa situation going on. So there's been some mishaps from people have lost their jobs from revealing too much.
Oh,
One of my friends, really good comic, Micah Brown, he was up for a promotion, and he no longer works there, but they had watched his kill. He did 2 Kill Tony sets, and they watched it to make sure it wasn't too much for him to be working where he was, and it wasn't. But still, it's like you can make that mistake very easily if you answer all the
oh,
questions.
yes, yes. I know I have a friend, really clever and brilliant woman, fantastic lady, good comic. She should be so much further than she is, and yeah, she's a proper diamond lady. This is Jenan Eunice, absolutely brilliant comic. If you see her, you'll see she's brilliant, and she's very productive. Like she's good at doing comedy shows. She's good at everything. Doctor, she's got everything going for her. But people saw her do her jokes online, and they launched a big HR investigation into it and tried to get into trouble. Luckily, she seems okay for now. Oh, actually, am I okay? Yeah, it's fine. But yeah, she's an absolutely lovely lady, and it's just yeah, it's funny how people will use their jokes for that. I don't know. Maybe I'll get fired because I'm a Mexican American. No, I don't know. It's fine. I mean, I work as comedians. We work in jobs that we don't necessarily like, or we do certain things to fund the bills. I mean, for example, it's a bit of and a job that I'm working in now. I like the customers, but there's a few members that I work with where it's a bit, oh, for fuck's sake, you
Yeah,
tolerate them, but it's where a lot of comedy comes from. But what am I getting? Yeah, it's ridiculous how people try and use your comedy life to try and ruin your. There's two separate things, man.
yeah.
What's all this?
Yeah, I don't know what that's about. I mean, for me personally, I know that a few people at my day job know that I do comedy, and I've been thankful enough that none of them want to see it. But no, at the same time, it's like I don't know why people are so apt to like, oh, let's find something wrong with the set, let's find, what are you saying that could possibly get you out of a job? And it's really mind blowing how that works. I don't agree with it, but like everybody has their own hobbies, right? Everybody has a hobby, and sometimes comedy for people is more of a hobby than a job. It's definitely more in the job realm for me. So like doing both a day job and comedy, it's you toeing the line of what you can and can't say, especially in Austin, which is like a big little city. You'll see somebody at work, and then you'll see them in the audience of a comedy club sometimes. So it's definitely uh, connected.
One thing on what you said there. Now with comedy, it feels like we do three jobs or even four, because a lot of comedians put on shows, a lot of
Mhm.
comedians put on podcasts. A lot of people, not only do you have to develop your set, but now you got to develop your social media presence, because a lot of big clubs now say that they only book you of a certain number of followers. So
Yeah,
it's like you're doing four or five jobs alongside your other jobs now.
yeah, yeah. It's definitely, you have to, and right, it's like one of those things too. When you're on stage, I always forget to basically, like, a lot of comics now will say follow me at, and then whatever, and then I always mess that up, and I'm just like, all right, have a good night. But you have to be like, hey, follow me at this, because that means you're probably going to get booked the more followers you have on your set, on your like your sets and stuff like that. um but then also it's like a kind of a double-edged sword, you know what I mean? Because you may have a perfect Instagram reel or TikTok that goes viral because you tell this one joke, and then you go to a comedy club and you replicate that joke, and people will critique it. They thought it was funny when they saw it online, but they will then pick it apart when they see it in person. There's a comic who came through recently, did a have had a bit that has been online. It kills. It's got so many likes, so many views, and they did that joke in person, and the room didn't really laugh. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Just because you've heard it before and that's what you came here for, this joke, it doesn't mean that just because he flubbed like the introduction to his joke doesn't mean you have to not laugh at it. Like, it's still funny. So it's, yeah, the social media thing is a big presence in comedy. Yeah, you have to. I mean, you post on social
A lot.
often. Big Zorro fans here in Austin, Texas.
They'll
Big
shoot
Zorro.
me.
We're waiting for the Zorro Texas tour. Yep, sorry, that was my dip right there. Yeah, we're waiting for the Zorro Texas tour. I think it'll be a hit, to be honest with you.
It would be fun. Well, I thought it would be funny to see if imagine if Zorro went to kill Tony. Oh, I'll get roasted completely if I did that.
I, I grew up in a house. My mom, huge British comedy fan, grew up with a lot of that. Grew up with a lot of Canadian comedy, Kids in the Hall, sketch show, all that stuff. So uh, there was a comic who had came over from the UK. She's very, very funny, and she did a 10-minute set to a full room. And I feel like people didn't get half of her jokes because she wasn't doing the stereotypical British, like Americans like have these weird stereotypes for, certain groups of people, and it's just like it's like the comedy was too smart for the room.
Yeah, she. So what? There's a thing that I had a chat with from Skulk in the that I mentioned it before we did the podcast, and he said he meant what Trevor Noah does to make himself succeed in a lot of rooms is he really studies where he's traveling to, so it almost makes it look. He makes the show special for them, and her doing a
Yes.
set didn't make it special for the audience. So she could have, if she'd maybe really researched the town and came up with a certain reference or something, that would have won them over. And she could
Yeah.
have maybe made done the jokes in a way where she made it relevant to people in Austin. But she
Yeah.
obviously, and he says that if you be really well researched in what you do, especially in visiting certain towns, it's almost as if you're coming into someone's house and most of their own family, but accurately, and they feel respected and loved. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you one thing that references that. This is something that I've learned through. I interviewed a comedian who was a bogan. It's a big thing in Australia, and they've got things called Pavlova and Russell Crowe. And whenever I come across an Aussie or Kiwi, I mention that to them, and that's a big thing that's in their culture. I don't know that much about it, but they're
Yeah.
into it. And when you bring those topics up, and they you can have a great and funny conversation with them. So yeah, I think that's what she did wrong because America is different. Austin is very different to London. She maybe, if she communicated that at the start and maybe made it more palpable, then it would have worked.
Yeah. Yeah. And I honestly, I've seen comics who they travel here and they do a few sets in the beginning because usually when you come from another country, you'll get booked. It's just instant booking. We got this great guy. We got this great gal coming from, like London. We got this person coming from friggin', I don't know, Scotland somewhere. And it's like you'll get booked, but usually that first set will bomb because it's like you're bringing over those jokes. And it's like what you said, like by the time that person gets to a week's worth of their own jokes, and they start making observations about Austin or in Texas in general, that's where they get the laughs. Like the comments about Texas are relatable to us because we see it every day out here. But it's funny to get a perspective from outside of that, like a very like what the hell type of, you know what I mean? Uh, what are you guys doing? It's like we don't even know. But that's funny that you brought that up. You know?
Hmm. Yeah, this is a thing that I had from Richard Williams in the last podcast. He says it's like a sales technique, and he says he enjoys when he says something, a joke that makes people uncomfortable. He enjoys using the craft to win them over to his side.
Yeah, it's the way to do it. It's the way to go. You got to win people over. I feel like I didn't do that enough when I was in your neck of the woods. But I didn't. I felt like it was a culture shock. You know, um, I had done the Queer Vision stand up set, but I was also like it was my own stupid move, right? Because I had essentially partied in Brooklyn the night before, and then I hopped on a plane that same night, and I'm pretty sure I was still drunk when I got over to the UK. I'm pretty sure I was still pretty hammered. And before I went to Queer Vision, I was trying my hardest to sober up because I was just, it was a lot. I was like, I'll just tell my Texas jokes. It's fine. It's fine. And I could have done that better and been more observant about the area uh, prior to getting on stage. But I mean, it wasn't a bad experience. It's just a little bit of a shock for me, you
Hmm.
know, because it's like you when you travel within the U.S., you like let's say I go on tour, I go to Nashville. I already in my head know all the jokes about Nashville because you know the way that people talk about it, and then I've been there once or twice. It's like, oh, okay, what can I country music? I'm gonna make a fucking joke about. Sorry about that. I'm gonna make a joke about Nashville, and I know it already. Country music. Let me make a dumb country joke. But it seems that over with y'all, it's like, how much do I really know? How much?
Hmm.
Yeah. So
But they feel respected and valued when you do that.
yeah, yeah. It's it makes them feel at home for sure when you come over and you're like, yeah, Nashville. See, you guys got more banjos than you do people. You know, it's just like stuff like that. Like and they're like, yep, we sure do. In Texas, it's another thing too. Like if you bring up guns and you're just like, yeah, Texas has, you know, every day a baby's born in Texas, they hand them a gun and then they're a true Texan. Like just stuff like that. Like you just, any gun joke will hit in Texas. Unfortunately, everybody loves, be it I'm against or I'm for guns, they love a joke because they all have they, most Texans have guns, so
Hmm.
they're like, "Oh yeah, I love this joke." So
So with everything that's so that you've experienced in Austin and like what's going on at the moment, and with your visit in London, what are your thoughts on like this year as a whole? What your, if you don't mind saying, what were your thoughts on how your experiences shaped you from last year visiting London, and what you want to do in the Austin new mecca of comedy scene?
I I think honestly, my experience in London has helped me more so with like kind of crowd work more because it's like everybody right now is in this fad of crowd work in the states, and they'll go up on stage without any prepared material and they'll just start asking people their jobs and doing this and this, and I feel like in London and in the UK, like you can get the crowd to be, you can hype up the crowd, you can talk to them more. And it got me comfortable coming back to Austin and doing that because sometimes Americans don't want to participate at all. It's like, oh, what do you do for a living? It's like, I don't want, there's been several times where comics have been like, what do you do? And they're just like, I don't want to do this. I'm good. I'm just here to watch. And I feel like doing a few comedy shows in London, it just really like gave me that comfortability to be like, what do you do? How do you do like the Queer Vision show? One of the comics was doing a song and handed an audience member a microphone. It's like, you're going to help me with this song. And like some parts of the States, people are like, I can't do that. Like, I don't have the confidence. I'm just here to see your comedy show. I'm not here to participate. But it seems like in you guys' region, it's like, yeah, look, give me the mic. I'll help you out. I'm like, wow, the gall, the ability to do that is what I would like to bring to Austin more than anything.
Sure.
Because I think also like there are people who aren't comedians, but they're funny.
Yeah.
Like you could find somebody who works as an accountant and has a funny thing that they just said, and you just riff off of that forever. You could just keep going with like, oh, do you like numbers? Like, what do you, just stuff like that. You can riff off of that stuff, and I think people don't take advantage of that as much as they should here. But yeah, I think that me bringing to Austin, I want witty humor. I want comedy that it's not all fart jokes.
Yeah.
I it's like it's only funny the first 100 times to hear a fart joke here in the States. But if there's a clever fart joke I can do that comes from your side, I'm running with it. I'm not stealing it, but just the way that you guys say things and articulate things and you build your jokes are different, and it keeps people paying attention. And I
Sure.
want more of that here. I don't need it every 2 seconds, but I want people to like listen, enjoy the story, and then hit them with a jab and make them laugh their asses off.
Sure.
So trying to bring that here.
Now, for anyone that's listening in now, how do they find out about you?
How do they find out about me? Pretty easy to find. I am. What do you mean? Like, as in, where's to find me? Or
Social media,
yeah,
and contact
I'm
you.
on Instagram. That's most of where I post my reels and my comedy. I've been really lazy on posting the good stuff. I just kind of will just chop some stuff up, put it together. But I'm on Instagram as Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Holden, not Holgan. Hollywood Hulk Holden. I thought that name up before he tore his shirt up at the Trump convention, but it's too good of a name. I'm a wrestling fan myself, so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna keep the name.
Yeah, keep it.
Yeah, I would keep it. He was a good wrestler at one point, but now he's just a fragile old guy with a bandana and a handlebar mustache. So, but yeah, that's where you can find me mostly on Instagram, Hollywood Hulk Hogan.
And this is another question. How would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered as a very masculine man who chops wood down every day and all the women love me. No, I'm just kidding. I would like, I mean, that too. But I'd like to be remembered as someone who is funny but relatable, and definitely just not only funny, but being able to bring people out of their shell and experience comedy from both sides. Like, you don't have to be a trans guy to laugh at trans guy jokes. You don't have to be a veteran to laugh at military jokes. You know, you don't have to be an American to laugh at American jokes. It's just one of those things. Like, I want to be able to bring that relatability, and I want to be remembered for that relatability. Um, and for the most part, that's most of what I did a show during Pride last year, and I had talked about my transness, and I had made jokes, and I got good laughs and good audience. And this older gentleman, very woodsy type gentleman, came up to me in the most hickish accent, and he's just like, my son, he just transitioned, and I didn't know that they look like you. I just thought they all look like little boys. And I'm like, no. And he's like, this makes me feel better. And I'm like, all right. He's like, I'm learning, and thank you for being on stage. I learned a lot, and I see that he's gonna be okay. He's gonna be okay. And I'm like, yeah, he's gonna be okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed Hollywood Hulk Holden, not Hogan, because he would win in a wrestling match. But I'll see you guys soon. I think so. Next two episodes are with an autistic clown, Stephen Catlin.
I'll be tuning in for that one.
He's interesting. He's a cool guy, and
Yeah.
a blind gay Singaporean comedian. And then after that, I'll likely be talking to Frank Sinatra, who plays Adolf Hitler.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But
That's
yeah,
interesting. That's an interesting.
it's really good. It's really
It
good.
would be a hit over here, unfortunately. Right? I don't. Either way, it would probably be a hit in Austin. But yeah, I look forward to seeing Zorro on tour here in Texas.
He will be there.